My name is Julia. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if this is the first video of mine that you're watching. I've been getting back into the swing of baking over the past few weeks. It's really one of the things that is helping me adjust to the new normal of having a baby and just helping me feel more like myself through the challenges I've had postpartum over the last almost 9 months at this point. This recipe that I'm making is a crusty no-knead bread. It's actually one of the first things I made to get myself back into baking. Not this day, I did it another day recently, but I really forgot how easy this is and how good it is. This isn't a sourdough, but you do let it sit on the counter to rise and let the gluten develop for like anywhere from 6 to 24 hours. So it does develop a really beautiful crumb, at least in my opinion. I am no expert bread maker, but my family and friends really love this bread. Even my baby, who is not great at chewing yet, really actually enjoys this with maybe some hummus or some nut butter or some mashed avocado, just chewing on a crispy, crunchy end of the bread. It only takes maybe 5 minutes of active prep time, and then it sits either, all day or overnight to rise. And then after 45 minutes in the oven, you have a beautiful golden loaf. The hardest part of this whole thing is honestly waiting for it to cool before digging in, and also maybe not eating the entire loaf in one go, because we have been known to smash one of these real fast. I will be putting all the recipes in this video in the description box, so either links to the recipes online or just writing out the recipes down below. So if you're interested in making any of these, you absolutely will be able to. Next up, I was feeling in the autumnal spirit and I wanted to dig in to some chocolate chip pumpkin bread. I was just going through my spices to make sure I actually had what I needed. Even though I did have pumpkin pie spice, I decided that it was just a little too far out of date and it probably wasn't gonna have a very potent flavor. So instead I grabbed my cinnamon, clove, and ginger, which are 3 of the ingredients in pumpkin pie spice. By the way, just because something is pumpkin spice flavored does not mean it is supposed to be pumpkin flavored or have any pumpkin in it. It is literally referring to the spice blend that is traditionally used in pumpkin pie, not the pumpkin flavor itself. So if you are upset that your pumpkin spice something or other doesn't have real pumpkin in it, it is not supposed to. It is just those warm seasonal spices. Anyway, okay. Like I mentioned, I've been getting back into baking recently, just kind of forcing myself to find the time to do it because I really do enjoy it once I'm in it. Sometimes that means throwing together bread dough in the morning before work and baking it before I pick up my son from daycare, or sometimes it's throwing something together after dinner or squeezing it in during nap time on the weekends. That last one is easier to accomplish when my husband is around, which thankfully he has been a lot recently. It's nice to have treats to enjoy, but I've also been sharing what I bake, which is another part of why I love baking. Food is such a special way to share my love with others, so whether it's bringing a treat to a party or leaving something in the break room at work, it's just something I can do to show others that I am thinking about them. I actually brought one of these loaves of pumpkin bread to work, and let me tell you, that is another great way to not consume all of the butter and sugar that goes into my baked goods. Gotta spread the wealth a little bit. Anyway, a new development in my household is that my son has officially been diagnosed with an egg allergy, not just for egg in sort of like normal scrambled or omelet form, but he is also allergic to egg baked into things. So I'm going to have to learn how to bake without egg. I think I'm going to do a video sometime where I test out a few eggless cake recipes so I can find something safe for him for his first birthday. My mom was so funny. She was like, can you even bake without eggs? And I was like, well, yes, Mom, vegan people do eat baked goods. And she was like, oh, yeah, I guess that's true. Well, that'll be a new challenge for you. Luckily, my son's allergist said that 90% of kids with egg allergies grow out of them by age 5. So we shouldn't have to worry about this as a lifelong allergy. But still, it is quite serious, and you know, it's opened up a new parenting anxiety, especially as he's eating more, and slowly we're gonna be having less control over the things that he consumes. We can't always be there, and eggs are in a lot of different things, especially baked goods. So, you know, we'll just have to take it day by day and make sure that he's as safe and prepared as he can be. I feel like I really stepped up my baking game on this day. I decided to be a grown-up and put some parchment paper inside my loaf pans to help release the bread, and I tell you what, I'm a changed woman. It was so easy to release the bread. I mean, I also greased the baking dishes, but once I cut around the outside edges, I was just able to turn the loaves over and they popped right out. I will never go back. I say that, but watch me literally get lazy and ruin something soon. And hot tip for any loaf that has chocolate chips in, sprinkle more on top. Just do it. You won't regret it. It does make it a little more fiddly when you're getting them out of the pans or whatever, but they look so beautiful, and then you get just another couple bites of chocolate. And if you're not in it for the chocolate, why are you even baking a chocolate recipe? Here's the final product. The next treat I made isn't actually a baked good. Sorry to mislead you with the title of this video, but it is a treat and it counts. A homemade Rice Krispies treat is far superior to the store-bought ones, and they are so simple. If you're not very comfortable in the kitchen, or you find baking challenging or whatever, this is an awesome treat to try. I'm using Aldi brand marshmallows and crispy rice cereal, and I just follow the recipe on the package, but I make one minor change that really elevates the flavor. Instead of melting the butter and marshmallows together, I take the extra minute or two to brown the butter first. This is basically just cooking the butter until the milk solids in it turn golden brown. It gets a delicious nutty flavor. You just have to keep your eye on it and make sure you don't burn it, because it does burn very easily. But once it's beautifully brown, you can toss in your marshmallows and let them melt, keeping it stirring. And that is all of the actual cooking required to make Rice Krispies treats. Then you just mix in your rice cereal and spread the mixture into a greased dish or pan. Top notch, cannot go wrong. I used to make Rice Krispies treats, but instead of using marshmallows, you melt in bite-sized Milky Way bars. So chocolatey and caramelly. Oh, so good. But this way, the more traditional way, is so simple, and honestly, it's like a pretty affordable treat to make as well. Does anyone out there remember Rice Krispies Treats cereal? Not just Rice Krispies, but the Treats cereal. It was like chunks of Rice Krispies Treats broken up as the cereal itself, and it was so good. It was my favorite cereal as a kid. They brought it back a few years ago. Well, as I say that, it was probably like a decade ago. Oh, that makes me feel old. But it was just as good as I remembered it. Something about those sugary childhood breakfasts that just really like have a hold on you. I also remember a childhood Cap'n Crunch cereal that came with a literal packet of frosting. You poured it on top of your bowl. Yeah, that was the 90s. But anyway, brown butter Rice Krispie treats, such a simple treat, slightly more complex flavor. You really can't go wrong. So delicious. Treat number 4 was a two-parter. I had a really busy few days, so in order to get this pie baked when I needed it done, I made my pie crust the night before. If you've never made pie crust from scratch, you are missing out. Don't get me wrong, I love a good Pillsbury refrigerated crust, so simple. But the flavor in a real homemade butter crust just takes your pie to the next level. I used this recipe from Acre Homestead for the first time last year and I'm hooked. It was really so simple too. Admittedly, it would be easier if I had a food processor, but I don't have one of those. So I just chopped up my cold butter into small cubes and then I used my hands to break it into smaller bits as I worked it into the flour mixture, which you'll see soon. When you make crust like this, it's really important to keep your butter as cold as possible. If your butter gets too soft and warm, it'll start melting before it even gets into the oven. You want the butter to cook between the layers of flour to give it fluffiness and flakiness to the crust, but if it's too warm before you get it in the oven, it just melts out. I mean, worse things could happen, but keeping the butter cold and the crust dough in general cold before baking is gonna give you a better end result. So I mentioned needing this pie done at a certain time. We had a super busy weekend, but I have friends that just had a baby a couple of days before this, and I really wanted to be able to bring them some food. So in order to make sure I could get everything pulled together for them, I had to work ahead and plan out a full couple days of cooking and baking in between all of the other plans we had. I actually filmed a video of what I put together for them. Some things were homemade, like this pie. Other things were just items from the store. But food is one of those things that I so appreciated when I was newly postpartum. When you're in the throes of newborn life and you're deliriously tired, running on empty, the last thing you want to have to think about is what you're going to feed yourself. The friends that visited and brought us food were my favorite visitors. And from that experience, I now know that I want to be the food lady whenever my friends have babies. So yeah, that video will be out, the next one after this one. If you're interested in seeing what I brought them, or if you like what you see here, please consider subscribing. It really does help out my channel and I so appreciate you for being here. This is the next day when I got the rest of the pie pulled together. I found this recipe a couple of years ago and it was unlike any other apple pie recipe I'd seen. Instead of just mixing apples into like a sugar mixture as the pie filling, you make almost like a caramel that you pour on top of the apples once they're in the pie dish. You'll see that soon. Again, just like with the brown butter in the Rice Krispies treats, it gives a little something extra, like you think you know what you're getting when you bite into an apple pie, but then you get this bite that's just like rich and caramelly and you're just like, whoa, it's elevated, it's unexpected. I love it. This is the first apple baking I've done this season. Coming up soon, my little family is gonna go apple picking with one of my oldest and dearest friends. We're gonna go to Northwest Indiana. For those of you who are not from Chicago, it's basically the Chicago suburbs. Like the farm we're going to is closer than some of the other farms in Illinois that we were looking at. But anyways, I will be bringing back lots of apples from that. Plus, there is an annual apple fest in a nearby neighborhood coming up soon, and I usually bring home a bag of apples from that too. I've also been getting some apples from my CSA box. That's like the farm share that I'm a member of. But I did have to supplement with some apples from the store for this pie. Now, here's a hot tip I learned from someone on the internet. It might have been Becky from Acre Homestead, but I honestly can't remember. Someone said that when they make something to bring to someone, they go to the thrift store and get a dish that they don't care if they get it back. Like, sure, if my friend returns this pie dish, that's great. And then I have another dish to use, but also they can keep it or give it to someone else or whatever. It only cost me $4.50 at my local thrift store, and it's great. It's a Pyrex dish in great condition. Honestly, my store had like 5 identical ones, all Pyrex. So that was such an easy choice for these friends who are gonna be so busy with their sweet new baby. No need for them to think about getting this dish back to me. Okay, speaking of apples though, a dear college friend who I lived with for a while in college and out of college, she had this incredible recipe for apple dumplings. I think it might be a Pennsylvania Dutch recipe, but I'm not entirely sure. It's sort of these like little individual pies, but they're almost like balls of crust filled with apple filling. And when you eat them, you put them in a bowl and pour warm milk on top. It sounds so strange, and I was very skeptical when she first told me about them, but then she made them and I tried them and oh my God, they're good. I had her send me the recipe in 2019, but I still haven't made them. So maybe this year will be the year that I actually do. That friend of mine was actually a big inspiration when it came to baking. I always liked to bake, but she loved to bake and she was a big scratch baker. I always kind of just used mixes. Almost every weekend she'd bake something, and she loved trying new recipes too. So as her roommate, I got to reap the benefits and partake in so many delicious treats. It always impressed me that she wasn't intimidated by complex recipes. I think she really just liked the process, and that's how I am these days. I love learning. I love being a beginner at something. I love building a new skill, and it's especially sweet when you literally get a sweet treat as the reward for your labors. Now, that's not to say that things never flop. It's all a learning process though, and I think one of my best words of advice around that kind of stuff is to always test a new recipe before you plan to bring something to other people. Stick to the tried and true ones that you know you love and that you know are going to turn out so there are no surprises. The fifth and final thing I baked recently were some banana muffins. The reason for this was actually as part of my son's allergy test. We knew he was allergic to like plain egg, like scrambled egg, because that's what he had a reaction to, but his allergist said they could also test for baked in egg if I brought a baked good with us to the appointment. He provided a recipe that would have the right concentration of egg protein for the test, and I didn't have very high hopes that the muffins would be any good. Why would they? We only needed to bring 1 or 2 muffins to his appointment, so I knew we'd have a few left to eat, and I figured either they'd be so-so and we'd just finish them to not be wasteful, or they'd be bad and we would just toss them and count them as, you know, a casualty of his allergy. Well, let me tell ya, I was pleasantly surprised. The recipe from the allergist says you can use either mashed banana or applesauce, and I'm thinking about trying the recipe again using applesauce and like upping the cinnamon or adding some other spices. I could even put in some small chunks of apple for like a nice seasonal treat. You'll also see in just a minute, the recipe was supposed to make 6 muffins, and I have 6 silicone muffin liners, but I actually had enough batter to make 8 muffins filled all the way to the top. The muffins in the 2 paper liners ended up having like a more traditional muffin shape. They were all still pretty flat, but I don't know, it must be something about the heat distribution of the silicone liners, because those ones were a little more domed, like they didn't have the kind of like sploosh of a muffin top. I don't know. Anyway, this was a lot of baking. I think I made all of this in just over a week. It's a lot, but it really does feel good to be back in the kitchen doing what I love. Thank you so much for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.